welcome to you all. My name is Antje Fiedler and I'm an associate editor of the Journal of Small Business Management. I have the great privilege today to talk with Professor Colin Donaldson about his paper that explores how entrepreneurial ecosystems can build legitimacy through signaling. This paper was co-authored by him together with Professor Jorge Villagrasa and Professor Christina Theodoraki. Colin is professor at EDEM Business School Valencia in Spain. Their paper, Inside Out and Outside In, How Entrepreneurial Ecosystems Can Build Legitimacy Through Signaling, was first published in September 2014 in the Journal of Small Business Management. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you very much, Antje, for inviting us to share some information about our paper. So first of all, I'd like to talk a bit about where the idea itself came from for the work. And well, we felt that there is increasing attention being given to entrepreneurial ecosystems and also collective place-based dynamics, given their perceived capacity to stimulate and drive social and economic growth. So the entrepreneurial journey becomes one that really is a multiplayer game filled with those individuals seeking resources to help them build, grow, and scale their ventures. And also at the other side, we have those that can provide those resources, such as entrepreneurial support organization. And what this does is it creates a highly complex environment in which the information is not always equally available nor shared by everyone. So one way to lessen these asymmetries of information is through sending signals. And signaling theory originates in information economics and involves the sending of cues that are representative of underlying qualities that under normal circumstances are not easily visible. And as a theory, signaling theory has been applied extensively in entrepreneurship, but it's usually at the nexus between the individual entrepreneur and the investor. However, it hasn't really been frequently applied to the entrepreneurial ecosystem context. And this for us was extremely interesting, as given the fact that signals are believed to be sent and given meaning in the particular context in which they are delivered and interpreted. Therefore, we wanted to study how signaling could impact the legitimacy and success of an emerging entrepreneurial ecosystem. Whereas more developed entrepreneurial ecosystems have been studied quite extensively, less mature systems we feel are vital to give a more complete picture and understanding of the area. And added to this and related to this interest in signaling theory, we also, within our specific location and the context of our study, which is Marina de Empresas entrepreneurial ecosystem in Valencia, in Spain, this provided an ideal context in which we could look at this signaling process, because it's basically built of three core institutions. So the Entrepreneurial University, EDEM, it also has an accelerator, a startup accelerator, which was ranked #1 by the Financial Times in Spain. And then we have an entrepreneurial financing company as well, which finances the growth and development of the startups located in Lancerera. And basically what we wanted to do was to try and find out or generate more knowledge on how collective action can help build these emerging entrepreneurial ecosystems, whilst also looking at the role that signaling could potentially play in building legitimacy as well. So that's basically a brief background about why we decided to engage in this study.
It's so fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing. The next question would be, what do you think are the most important insights from the paper?
Let me just mention a very few very briefly that we feel are most relevant. But before I do so, I would like to say that our explanations that we convey about legitimacy being built through signaling aren't very novel, because we were drawing on a large body of modeling on collective action, on institutional theory, and also game theory. But where the real novelty lays in our paper is their application and combination in the entrepreneurial ecosystem context, because we haven't really seen that been done before. So that being said, our first insight would probably be that legitimacy in entrepreneurial ecosystems is multi-level and contextual. So we were able to reaffirm the idea that sending signals is a socially situated phenomenon. And we find evidence that depending on the audience, on their values, and also the contextual level at which signals are being sent, this influenced which signals were attended to, how they were interpreted, and also if they were perceived as relevant or not. So to try and capture this complexity, we created a multi-level signaling model, which incorporated 3 different levels, so macro, meso, and micro. At the macro level, we looked at the context, so certain things as the attractiveness of place or the stereotypical material markers of ecosystems, such as startup counts or the amount of investment received, and then also collective action. Collective action at the macro level focused on collective storytelling, the narrative of place, the media, and interestingly for our context, it was the importance of this overriding mission of the different core institutions. So there was a mission framing involved as well. If we move on to the meso level, these were the institutional arrangements, so the different organizations that I mentioned before, each having their own particular practices and spaces. And then finally, at the micro level, we had the individual behaviors of entrepreneurial actors, which could either help enhance their legitimacy, or at the same time, it had the potential to destroy legitimacy. So that would be our first main insight. Our second insight would be the finding that norms and signals can help build trust, cooperation, and also help in the governance of emerging entrepreneurial ecosystems. So that we're saying here that shared norms and effective signaling, especially over the longer term, and especially internal signals as well, are critical mechanisms that can be used to help overcome uncertainty, to try and deter opportunism, and also to foster this idea of cooperation. And one of probably the prime instances of this being played out was when we seen a lot of examples of free riding. There were a lot of free riders that represented a persistent risk to the system, and therefore mechanisms were needed and are needed to try and ensure that the community has reliable contributors, given that any sort of unchecked opportunism undermines the trust and sustainability of the ecosystem as a whole. And in this respect, we found 2 core mechanisms. The first one was the temporality of signals. So you had to signal a long-term commitment that showed reliability, and it also allowed you to monitor your own and others' behaviors. And then the second mechanism is the creation of common knowledge. So publicly shared signals and rituals helped actors to understand not just the information that was sent, but it also allowed them to know what other people know as well in the community and what their expectation was. And what this did was it helped foster coordinated collective action. So basically, to sum up, we were able to evidence the capacity of the entrepreneurial ecosystem to subsidize the signaling process through providing increased visibility, increased accessibility, and so too also absorbing the costs of signaling for various actors. But the nuance here is that although the ecosystem absorbed the costs, there was also additional costs of values alignment with the ecosystem as a whole.
That's fascinating. Brilliant. Thank you. The final question I have would be around the implications for practitioners or policymakers or both.
So most policies focused on entrepreneurial ecosystems, I think that it's fair to say adopt a resource munificence approach that are largely driven by an economics or a markets-based logic. So it's driven by one way of thinking, or a predominant way of thinking. And we also see a lot in policy and building ecosystems is the frequent application of the metaphor of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, which can become almost like a buzzword. But with this buzzword, it tends to assume fixed processes, irrespective of the uniqueness of the context in which we're talking about. and this can create a certain degree of vulnerability towards entrepreneurial ecosystem effectiveness. So I would reason that policy guidance that relies heavily on decision-making based on optimal or trying to find optimal configurations, yet neglects or remains distance from the day-to-day actions of the entrepreneurial actors and the community themselves, then it can become quite problematic to achieve success. And I think this is one of the reasons that we found the current ecosystem under study was successful. They had a local actor who was extremely successful, and he was able to share his knowledge, ideas, and he was able to understand the process in a more practical way. So that person was Juan Roch, and he was the head of he's the founder of Mercadona, the largest supermarket chain in Spain, and he was actually the one that drove this initiative. So it's a privately governed entrepreneurial ecosystem, and he was very much committed to it. So he knew how to navigate the process. But in general, my recommendations would probably be not to rely solely on quantitative measures. So although these are extremely important, can we now try to incorporate some qualitative measures, such as through ethnographic studying of the different locales, or maybe through relationship mapping of the different connections of the ecosystem, and basically just getting feedback from the community and how they perceive the health of their ecosystem. Related to this, there's the need to try and cultivate a community-based logic. So let's move and progress and combine the profit or economics-based logic with one that is community-based that can maybe help over the longer term. And finally, just to close, I would say at the level of the entrepreneurial actor themselves, this could mean that they have to signal a commitment through a long-term investment to the ecosystem, and they have to take a responsibility for the governance of the ecosystem themselves. How? Through, for example, through upholding the norms that the ecosystem has, through buying into the mission, and also through monitoring and sanctioning any of those deviant behaviors, such as free riding, that could potentially occur. But that's basically what I could recommend at the moment. But if you look at the paper, it goes into a lot more detail, and you can see different aspects and more explanations and things like that.
Thank you so much, Colin, for this really interesting overview of the paper. I'm sure that the readers want to now have a look at the full paper, and that is available at Taylor and Francis' website, the Journal of Small Business Management. Once again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and all this knowledge that you share with us.
Thank you very much.